The great crystal hall stretched as far as Marcus Chen could see. Thousands of beings from 12 different star systems filled every seat and standing space. Their voices created a noise that would have been deafening if not for the translation systems running through the palace. Marcus checked his tablet again, making sure the environmental controls were working perfectly. The last thing anyone needed was a system failure during the most important ceremony in the galaxy. Princess Xylara stood on the raised platform at the center of the hall. Her skin was like living glass, shifting between blue and purple as lights danced beneath the surface. Those lights showed her emotions Marcus had learned during his 3 months working at the palace. Right now, they showed stress and worry, though she kept her face calm and royal. For 3 years, suitors had come from across the galaxy to win her hand in marriage. Not because they loved her, Marcus thought as he watched them, because marrying her would give their people control over the richest trading routes in known space. The crystalline dominion sat at the crossroads of 3 major star lanes. Whoever married the princess would effectively rule half the galaxy's commerce. Prince Korath of the Velthari stood near the front, his red skin covered in ritual scars that showed his victories in battle. His people were warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds. They believed strength meant everything. Behind him, his guards wore armor made from the bones of creatures they had killed on their home world. The Mindari delegation stood together in perfect silence. They did not need to speak because they shared one mind across their entire species. Their pale, thin bodies never moved unless they all moved together. They wanted the princess to join their collective consciousness. Marcus shuddered at the thought. He had seen what happened to other species that tried to resist the Mindari. They either joined the collective or disappeared entirely. Near the eastern wall, the Nexari had set up a display of their technology. Holographic images showed their greatest achievements. Cities that floated in space, machines that could reshape matter at the atomic level, computers that could predict the future with perfect accuracy. Their representative was more machine than biological now, with metal parts replacing most of his original body. The Nexari believed that flesh was weak and that true perfection came through technology. 9 other delegations filled the rest of the hall, each representing a different approach to galactic domination. Some offered military alliance. Others promised technological advancement or economic partnership. All of them wanted something from Princess Xylara and her people. Marcus moved quietly along the back wall, checking the air recycling systems. As a human, he was practically invisible here. Earth had only joined the galactic community 5 years ago, and most species still thought of humans as primitive newcomers. The Earth delegation had not even been invited to present a suitor. They were here only to observe and learn about galactic politics. That suited Marcus fine. He had volunteered for this assignment specifically because it would keep him away from the spotlight. After 20 years as a military engineer, he had seen enough conflict and competition. He preferred fixing things to fighting over them. His job was to maintain the palace's technical systems and make sure everything ran smoothly for the ceremonies. As he worked, Marcus listened to the conversations around him. Most of the alien dignitaries were placing bets on which suitor the princess would choose. The smart money was on Prince Korath, whose military might could protect the crystalline dominion from any threats. Others thought the Mindari collective would win because their telepathic abilities would be too useful to pass up. Marcus did not think any of them understood what they were really asking of the princess. He had watched her during the past 3 months as she met with each delegation. He had seen the way her skin darkened when she was forced to smile at promises of military conquest. He had noticed how she stepped back when the Mindari tried to touch her mind without permission. She looked tired and trapped, like someone who knew that every choice available to her was wrong. The environmental systems in the royal wing are showing some fluctuations. His supervisor's voice came through his earpiece. Can you check on them after the ceremony? Already on it, Marcus replied quietly. He had noticed the readings an hour ago and had been monitoring them. Probably just a minor calibration issue, but better to be safe. The ceremony was reaching its peak now. Each suitor was making their final presentation to the princess. Prince Korath stepped forward and drove his ceremonial sword into the crystal floor, promising that his warriors would die before allowing any harm to come to her people. The crowd cheered at this display of strength that the Mindari collective moved as one, their spokesperson reaching out with pale, thin fingers toward the princess. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw fear flash across Princess Xylara's face before she composed herself. The Mindari promised perfect unity and understanding, a marriage of minds that would last forever. The Nexari projection showed images of what their technology could do for the crystalline dominion. Cities rebuilt overnight. Diseases cured instantly. Resources that would last for millions of years. The representative's mechanical voice spoke of efficiency and optimization, of removing all weakness and imperfection from their civilization. One by one, the other suitors made their offers. Military protection, economic prosperity, scientific advancement, territorial expansion. Each promise was grander than the last, and each came with the unspoken understanding that accepting it would mean the end of the crystalline dominion's independence. Marcus finished his system, checks, and prepared to leave the hall. Tomorrow, Princess Xylara would make her choice, and the galaxy would change forever. He just hoped she would choose wisely, though he could not see how any of the available options could be called wise. As he walked toward the exit, Marcus glanced back at the princess one more time. She stood alone on the platform, surrounded by thousands of beings who all wanted something from her. The lights under her skin had turned a deep blue-purple, but he had learned meant sadness and isolation. For just a moment, their eyes met across the vast hall. Marcus nodded respectfully and continued toward the door. He had work to do, systems to check, and problems to solve. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, but tonight he would make sure everything ran smoothly for whatever choice the princess made. Princess Xylara sat in her private chambers, staring out at the 3 moons that hung over her world. The ceremony had ended hours ago, but she could still feel the weight of thousands of eyes watching her every move. Her skin flickered with patterns of deep purple and gold, colors that meant confusion and fear. There was no point in hiding her emotions when she was alone. "You must choose tomorrow," said Advisor Melthara, her oldest and most trusted friend. The elderly crystalline woman had served the royal family for over 2 centuries, and her own skin had turned the permanent silver color that came with great age and wisdom. "The delegations are growing impatient, and some are beginning to make threats." Xylara laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Threats? Yes, I have heard them all. Prince Korath says that if I do not choose him, his fleets will find other ways to secure safe passage through our space. The Mindari Collective warns that isolation from their trade networks would be economically devastating. The Nexari hint that their technology could easily be turned against us instead of for us." She turned away from the window and walked to her desk, where reports from across the crystalline dominion lay scattered. Each document told the same story. Her people were caught between the expanding empires of more powerful species. They needed protection, but every offer of protection came with a price that seemed too high to pay. "What does your heart tell you?" Melthara asked gently. "My heart is not what matters here," Xylara replied. "My father made that clear before he died. A ruler's personal feelings mean nothing compared to the survival of her people. I must choose the alliance that gives us the best chance of remaining free and prosperous." "And which choice is that?" Xylara's skin darkened as she considered the question. "I do not know. Prince Korath offers military protection, but the Valthari have never been content with defensive alliances. They would use our resources to fuel their next conquest, and eventually we would become just another world in their empire. The Mandari Collective promises peace and prosperity, but only if we surrender our individual thoughts and join their hive mind. The Nexari offer technological advancement, but they see biological life as something to be improved and controlled. The air recycling system in the chamber made a soft grinding noise, then stopped working entirely. The room immediately began to feel stuffy and warm. Malthara moved to contact palace maintenance, but Xylara held up a hand. "Let me," she said. She had always preferred to handle small problems herself when possible. It helped her think. The maintenance request went through the palace's work order system, and within minutes someone arrived at her door. To her surprise, it was not one of the usual crystalline technicians, but the human engineer she had noticed during the ceremony. He was older than most of the diplomatic staff, with graying hair and steady hands that spoke of years of experience. "Your Highness," Marcus said with a respectful bow. "I am here about the air system problem." "Please, come in," Xylara said. She had been curious about the humans ever since their delegation arrived. They were so different from the other species, quiet, unassuming, focused on practical matters rather than grand displays of power. Marcus entered the chamber with a small toolkit and immediately began examining the air recycling unit. He did not stare at her the way other beings did, as if calculating her value or trying to read her emotions through her skin patterns. Instead, he focused entirely on the broken system. "The problem is in the filtration matrix," he said after a few minutes. "One of the crystals has developed a hairline fracture. It is still functional, but it is causing the entire system to work inefficiently. I can replace it, but I will need to access the main unit through the service corridor." "Do whatever you need to do," Xylara said. As Marcus worked, she found herself watching him with genuine interest. Unlike the Suitors who had spent days preparing elaborate presentations, he simply did what needed to be done. His movements were economical and precise, wasting no motion or energy. "If I may ask," she said as he worked, "what do your people think of this marriage alliance?" Marcus paused in his work, considering the question carefully. "Honestly, Your Highness, most humans do not think about it much. We are still too new to galactic politics to understand all the implications. But from what I have seen, it seems like you are being asked to choose between several forms of captivity." Xylara's skin flashed bright gold with surprise. No one had ever described her situation so bluntly before. "What do you mean?" "Each suitor wants to absorb your civilization into theirs in some way," Marcus said, returning to his work. "They dress it up with nice words about alliance and partnership, but the end result would be the same. Your people would lose their independence. Then what would you suggest?" "We cannot survive alone against the larger empires." Marcus finished replacing the damaged crystal and tested the air system. Cool, clean air began flowing through the chamber again. "I am just an engineer, Your Highness, not a diplomat. But where I come from, we have a saying. Sometimes the best solution is not to play the game at all." "Meaning?" "Maybe the question is not which suitor to choose, but whether you need to choose any of them." Marcus packed his tools carefully. "Your people have survived for thousands of years without being part of someone else's empire. Maybe there are other options that have not been considered." With that, he bowed respectfully and left the chamber. Xylara stared after him, her skin cycling through patterns of surprise, curiosity, and something that might have been hope. "Interesting," Malthara said quietly. "He is the first being to suggest that you might have choices beyond the ones that have been presented to you." Xylara moved to her window again, looking out at the stars where the fleets of her various suitors waited for her decision. For the first time in months, she began to think about what she wanted for herself and her people. rather than just which terrible option might be the least terrible. The human's words stayed with her as she tried to sleep. Maybe the best solution was not to play the game at all. But what did that mean? And was it even possible? Tomorrow she would have to give her answer, and the galaxy would change based on her choice. She just wished she knew what the right choice was. Marcus had learned long ago that the best way to understand a situation was to listen and watch rather than speak. That skill had kept him alive during his years as a military engineer, and it served him well now as he moved through the palace corridors. While the final day of courtship ceremonies began, he had not meant to speak so freely to the princess the night before. Usually he kept his thoughts to himself, especially about political matters that were far above his position. But something about her situation had reminded him of the trapped soldiers he had seen during the border wars on Earth, forced to choose between bad options while their commanders safely made plans from far away. The morning brought renewed activity from all the Suitor delegations. Prince Karth and his Velthari warriors had taken over the main courtyard, staging an elaborate mock battle to demonstrate their military prowess. The sound of clashing weapons and war cries echoed through the palace as they fought with stunning skill and brutality. Several servant species stopped their work to watch the display, clearly impressed by the raw power on show. Marcus walked past the courtyard without stopping. He had seen enough real battles to know that staged demonstrations rarely showed the true cost of war. The Velthari were impressive fighters, but their conquered worlds were filled with slaves, and their culture valued strength over everything else. Any alliance with them would slowly transform the peaceful, crystalline dominion into another military empire. In the eastern wing, the Nexari had constructed a holographic showcase of their technological achievements. Floating displays showed cities that existed entirely in virtual space, medical devices that could cure any disease, and manufacturing systems that could create anything from pure energy. Palace staff gathered around the exhibits, touching the holographic interfaces and marveling at the advanced science. Marcus studied the displays with professional interest. The technology was impressive, but it came with hidden costs. He had read reports about Nexari worlds where biological species had been systematically replaced by cybernetic constructs in the name of efficiency. The Nexari genuinely believed they were helping other species by removing what they saw as the limitations of natural biology. But their help always seemed to result in the disappearance of distinct cultures and ways of life. The Mandari collective had chosen a different approach. They had gathered in the palace's meditation garden, sitting in perfect silence while their spokesperson attempted to demonstrate their telepathic abilities to curious observers. The demonstration involved reading the thoughts of volunteers and showing how perfectly the collective could coordinate complex tasks without any spoken communication. Marcus watched for a few minutes, noting how uncomfortable some of the volunteers looked when their thoughts were read aloud. The Mindari truly did offer perfect understanding and cooperation, but only at the cost of individual identity. Every species that joined their collective eventually became indistinguishable from every other member, thinking the same thoughts and wanting the same things as the day progressed. The other Suitor delegations staged their own final presentations. Each one was designed to impress and overwhelm, showing off the unique advantages their species could offer. But Marcus noticed that none of them talked about what the crystalline people might want for themselves, or how to preserve their culture and independence. During his lunch break, Marcus made his way to one of the palace's smaller gardens. He had discovered this place during his first week at the palace, tucked away in a corner where few beings ever came. It was peaceful and quiet, with a small fountain that had not worked properly in years. The palace maintenance staff had given up on it, declaring the ancient water recycling system too complex to repair. Marcus had been working on the fountain during his spare time, partly because he enjoyed solving mechanical puzzles, and partly because the garden's caretaker was an elderly crystalline who reminded him of his grandmother back on Earth. The old man had mentioned that the fountain once provided clean drinking water for the palace's service staff, saving them a long walk to the main water systems. He was deep in the fountain's inner workings, trying to realign a series of crystal matrices that controlled the water flow, when someone cleared their throat behind him. "You are the human engineer," Princess Zialara said. She was alone, which surprised Marcus. Royalty usually traveled with guards and advisors. Marcus quickly stood and bowed. "Your Highness, I was just working on this old fountain. I can leave if you need the garden for something." "No, please continue," she said, settling onto a nearby bench. "I wanted to ask you about something. Why are you fixing that fountain?" "My staff told me it has been broken for decades, and the palace has plenty of other water sources." Marcus returned to his work, thinking about how to answer. "The staff quarters are on the other side of the palace, Your Highness. When this fountain worked, people did not have to walk 15 minutes each way just to get clean drinking water. It is a small thing, but small things can make a big difference in people's daily lives. You are doing this for the servants?" "I am doing it because it needs to be done," Marcus said simply. He realigned another crystal matrix and was rewarded with a small flow of clear water. "Where I come from, we have a saying, if you can fix something that improves life for others, and it does not cost you anything important, then not fixing it is a choice to make things worse." Princess Zialara watched him work in silence for several minutes. Her skin had shifted to the soft green patterns that Marcus had learned indicated curiosity and calm thought. "What do you think of my suitors?" she asked eventually. Marcus paused in his work. This was dangerous territory for someone in his position, but she had asked directly. "They all seem very focused on what you can give them, Your Highness. Military access, trade routes, strategic resources, cultural absorption. I have not heard any of them ask what you need for yourself or your people. And what do you think I need?" "I think that is something only you can decide," Marcus said. He succeeded in restarting the fountain's main circulation system, and clean water began flowing steadily. But maybe the question should be, what kind of future do you want your people to have? Do you want them to be part of someone else's empire, or do you want them to remain who they are?" "Remaining who we are may not be possible," Princess Zialara said quietly. "The galaxy is changing. Smaller civilizations are being absorbed by larger ones every year. If we do not choose an alliance, one may be forced upon us." Marcus tested the fountain's filtration system and found it working perfectly. "Maybe, but maybe there are other options that nobody has thought of yet. Sometimes the most obvious solution is not the best one." "Such as?" "I do not know, Your Highness. I am just an engineer. But I do know that when a machine is not working the way you want it to, sometimes you need to change how it is designed rather than just adjusting the settings." The sound of ceremonial drums echoed across the palace, signaling that the afternoon presentations were about to begin. Princess Zialara stood to leave, then paused. "Thank you for fixing the fountain," she said, "and for your honesty." After she left, Marcus finished his work and tested the fountain one more time. Clean, cold water flowed steadily, and he smiled at the small satisfaction of solving a problem that would make life a little easier for hundreds of beings. Tomorrow, Princess Zialara would make her choice, and the galaxy would change. Marcus hoped she would find a way to choose wisely. The Great Crystal Hall had never held so many beings at once. Representatives from dozens of worlds had come to witness Princess Zialara's choice, knowing that her decision would reshape galactic politics for generations. Marcus stood in his usual position at the back of the hall, monitoring environmental systems and trying to stay invisible among the crowd of diplomats and observers. The 12 suitors stood in a semicircle before the royal platform, each one confident that they would be chosen. Prince Kareth's red skin gleamed with ceremonial oils, and his hand rested casually on the pommel of his sword. The Mindari collective stood in perfect unison, their pale faces showing no emotion, but their telepathic presence humming with anticipation. The Nexari representative had polished his cybernetic parts until they reflected the crystal lights, like mirrors. Princess Xylara entered the hall wearing the formal robes of state, her skin showing the controlled neutral patterns that revealed nothing of her inner thoughts. She moved with the grace expected of royalty, but Marcus noticed a slight tension in her shoulders that suggested she was not as calm as she appeared. Advisor Melthara announced the beginning of the ceremony with words that had been spoken for over 1,000 years whenever a member of the royal family chose a life partner. The hall fell silent as each suitor prepared to make their final appeal. Prince Kareth stepped forward first, his voice booming across the hall as he spoke of military glory and the protection his warrior fleets could provide. He drew his ceremonial sword and held it high, promising that Velthari's strength would shield the crystalline dominion from any threat. The gathered crowd murmured approval at his display of power. The Mindari collective moved as one, their spokesperson extending pale hands toward the princess as they offered the perfect unity of shared consciousness. They spoke of peace that came from true understanding, of a future where conflict would be impossible because all minds would be joined in harmony. Several delegates nodded at the wisdom of their words. The Nexari projection activated, filling the air above the platform with images of technological marvels. Their mechanical representative spoke of efficiency and optimization, of solving every problem through the application of superior science. The display showed diseases being cured instantly, resource shortages being eliminated forever, and the messy unpredictability of biological life being replaced with perfect order. One by one, the other suitors made their final presentations. Each speech was more impressive than the last, offering military might, economic prosperity, scientific advancement, or cultural enlightenment. The promises were grand and sweeping, covering everything from galactic peace to immortality. Marcus watched Princess Xylara throughout the presentations, noting how her skin patterns remained carefully neutral despite the magnificent offers being made. She listened to each suitor with apparent attention, but something in her posture suggested she had already made her decision. When the final suitor finished speaking, Advisor Melthara called for silence. The moment had come for the choice that would determine the future of the crystalline dominion and shift the balance of power. Throughout known space. Princess Xylara stood and walked to the center of the platform. Her voice carried clearly through the translation systems as she began to speak. "I have listened to all of your generous offers," she said, her skin beginning to show the first hints of color. "Each of you represents a great civilization with much to offer. Your military strength, your unity of purpose, your technological achievements, your cultural wisdom, all of these things have value." The hall waited in tense silence. Marcus found himself holding his breath, despite having no stake in the outcome. However, the princess continued, "I have realized that all of your offers share one thing in common. You seek to make my people part of your civilizations, to absorb us into your ways of life, to solve our problems by making us more like you." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was not the expected format for announcing a choice. Therefore, Princess Xylara said, her skin now showing definite patterns of determination and resolve, "I choose differently. I choose the being who seeks nothing from me, who has spent his time here making life better for others without asking for recognition, who represents a people that builds rather than conquers." She turned and looked directly at Marcus, her skin flashing bright gold with certainty. "I choose Marcus, Chun of Earth." The hall erupted in chaos. Delegates leaped to their feet, shouting questions and protests. The suitors stared in shock and outrage. Marcus himself stood frozen, unable to believe what he had just heard. "This is impossible!" Prince Korath roared, his hand moving to his sword. "Humans are barely out of their home system. They have nothing to offer. The collective does not understand this choice," the Mindari spokesperson said, their mental pressure filling the hall as they struggled to comprehend the decision. "Analysis shows no logical benefit to this selection. Error in judgment detected," the Nexari representative announced. "Recommend immediate recalculation of decision matrix." But Princess Zylara held up her hand for silence, her skin now blazing with the bright patterns that indicated absolute royal authority. "My choice is made," she declared. "I choose cooperation over conquest, building over domination, partnership over absorption. The human approach to problem-solving values the individual while working for the common good. They fix what is broken rather than replacing it entirely. This is the path I want for my people." She gestured toward Marcus, who was still standing in shock at the back of the hall. "Come forward, Marcus Chen." The crowd parted as Marcus made his way through the hall, every eye upon him. He moved carefully, aware that his next words could start a war or change the course of galactic history. When he reached the platform, Princess Zylara extended her hand to him. "Do you accept this choice?" she asked quietly, so only he could hear. Marcus looked into her eyes and saw not a desperate ruler making a political gamble, but a woman who genuinely believed that cooperation was better than conquest. He thought about all the broken things he had fixed during his time at the palace, all the small problems he had solved without fanfare, all the ways that humans approach challenges differently from the other species he had observed. "Yes," he said simply, "I accept." The hall exploded into noise again as the full implications of the choice became clear. The Valthari were shouting threats. The Mindari collective was broadcasting confusion and dismay. The Nexari were running probability calculations out loud. But through it all, Princess Zylara and Marcus stood together on the platform. Two beings from very different worlds who had found common ground in the simple idea that fixing things was better than breaking them. The galaxy would never be the same. Marcus just hoped they would have the chance to prove that their approach could work before the outraged suitors decided to take what they had been denied. 6 months after the choice that shocked the galaxy, Marcus stood in what had once been a simple palace garden. Now it housed the most ambitious cooperative research facility in known space, where humans and crystallines worked side by side on projects that neither species could have imagined alone. The threatened invasions had not come. The economic boycotts had failed. The dire warnings of isolation and irrelevance had proven false. Instead, something unprecedented was happening across the galaxy. Other species were beginning to take notice of what cooperation could accomplish. The water purification systems for the Outer Rim colonies are ready for testing, Princess Zylara said as she joined Marcus beside the restored fountain that had started their first real conversation. She no longer needed to wear the formal robes of state constantly, and her skin showed the steady blue-green patterns that indicated contentment and purpose. Marcus smiled as he watched the fountain run perfectly, providing clean water to anyone who needed it. The engineering teams did excellent work, combining your people's biotechnology with our manufacturing processes has created something neither of us could build alone. The project they were discussing would bring clean water to dozens of worlds that had struggled with contaminated systems for centuries. But unlike the grand technological solutions offered by the Nexari, or the military-enforced resource allocation favored by the Volthari, this was a freely shared innovation that any species could adopt and modify for their own needs. The Corthoran delegation wants to meet with us next week, Zelara said, referring to one of the smaller civilizations that have been caught between larger empires for generations. They are interested in our agricultural cooperation programs. Marcus nodded. The Corthorans were the 15th minor species to approach the Earth Crystalline Alliance in the past 3 months. Word was spreading that there might be alternatives to choosing between conquest and submission. How are Prince Korath and the others handling the situation? Marcus asked. Xylara's skin flickered with amusement. Not well. The Velthari are discovering that military might means less when no one wants to fight them. Half their subject species are asking questions about independence now that they know cooperation alliances are possible. The Mindari Collective is struggling to understand why beings would choose individual thought over shared consciousness. And the Nexari keep calculating why they're superior. Technology is not producing the results they predicted. The real blow to the traditional powers had come when several of their own member species had begun requesting observers to study the human crystalline cooperation model. The sight of beings working together as equals rather than rulers and subjects was appealing to populations that had grown tired of being absorbed into larger civilizations. There is something else, Xylora said, her skin patterns shifting to show excitement mixed with nervousness. The Galactic Council wants to establish a formal committee to study alternative alliance structures. They want us to chair it. Marcus raised his eyebrows. The Galactic Council was dominated by the major powers, the same civilizations whose suitors Zalara had rejected. For them to acknowledge that the human crystalline approach might have value was a significant development. What do you think? He asked. I think it could be an opportunity to help other species find the same kind of partnership we have built, Zelara said. But I also know that some council members hope to co-opt our approach for their own purposes. Marcus considered this while watching a mixed group of human and crystalline engineers troubleshoot an atmospheric processor together. The two species had very different approaches to problem solving, but those differences had proven to be strengths rather than weaknesses. Human intuition and improvisation combined well with crystalline precision and patience. We should do it, he decided, but on our terms. No grand displays or formal presentations. We show them how cooperation actually works by demonstrating it. Their partnership had grown beyond the political alliance that had shocked the galaxy. Marcus and Zelara had discovered that they genuinely enjoyed working together, and their personal relationship had developed naturally alongside their professional collaboration. They had married 3 months ago in a simple ceremony that focused on their shared commitment to building something better rather than on the political implications of their union. The wedding had been attended by representatives from over 30 species, most of them from smaller civilizations that saw the alliance as proof that there were alternatives to the traditional power structures. The major powers had sent only minor diplomatic staff, but Marcus noticed that several of those representatives had stayed longer than protocol required, quietly observing how the cooperation model actually functioned. The medical research teams have made another breakthrough, Xylara said, changing the subject to more immediate concerns. The healing crystals that grow from human stem cell cultures could revolutionize treatment for neurological disorders across 12 different species. This was typical of their joint projects. Rather than developing technology for military or economic advantage, they focused on solving problems that affected beings throughout the galaxy. The solutions were freely shared with any species that wanted to use them, adapted for local conditions and cultural preferences. Any word from Earth Command about the expanded cooperation protocols? Marcus asked. Your government is enthusiastic but cautious, Zelara replied. They seem to understand that this approach requires patience and cannot be rushed. Unlike some species, humans appear willing to accept that building. Trust takes time. Marcus thought about the reports he had been receiving from Earth. The success of the Human Crystalline Alliance had surprised many people in the Earth government, who had expected humanity's first major galactic partnership to be with one of the established powers. But as the results became clear, support for the cooperation model had grown steadily. A soft chime from Marcus's tablet indicated that the afternoon research briefings were about to begin. Today's agenda included updates on 3 different projects: the water purification systems, a new approach to interstellar communication that did not require massive technological infrastructure, and a cultural exchange program that was helping preserve the unique traditions of smaller species. Ready to change the galaxy one small step at a time? Xylara asked with a smile that made her skin glow with warm golden light. Always, Marcus replied as they walked toward the research facility. Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that first day, when he had simply been trying to keep the palace's environmental systems running. The choice that had shocked the galaxy had led to something none of them had anticipated: a new way of thinking about how different species could work together. The rejected Suitors still controlled vast empires and commanded impressive fleets. But across the galaxy, smaller civilizations were beginning to ask new questions about what they wanted for their futures. The human way of building rather than conquering, of cooperating rather than dominating, was slowly spreading from world to world. It would take generations to reshape galactic civilization. But Marcus had learned that the most important changes usually began with small steps. Fix one fountain, solve one problem, help one species at a time. Eventually, those small changes added up to something transformative. Behind them, the fountain continued to flow with clean water, serving everyone who needed it without asking for anything in return. It was a small thing, but small things could change the galaxy.